So I'm going to kick off just quickly with an introduction, so you at least know where I come from and what my journey has been, and then I'll elaborate a bit on what Visa does, some interesting insights from an accounting perspective, hopefully, and then we'll close off with a quick quiz. So I would encourage you to listen to some of the stats I'm going to quote. Being CAs, I know you'll be extremely focused on the detail. So let's see at the end how that goes. So from my perspective, I started my varsity journey in the mid-90s, finished just before the turn of the century, got into banking. I didn't do CA. I studied a military degree for military finance, effectively in the State Department, internal audit, management accounts, information technology, business and military strategy. So quite an interesting degree at the University of Stellenbosch. And then jumped straight into a finance career at Absa Bank at that stage. Looked at what was new at that stage, internet banking, and how internet banking would help businesses and individuals with their payments. So very, very interesting journey then. Spent about 5 to 6 years in the bank. Then joined a fintech where I had the privilege of processing and working with a great team that processed salary payments. So like the Springboks or the SA cricket team or Sasol executives or some of the famous radio stations in South Africa's directors and talk show hosts got to do their salary payments. It was very interesting, and I learned a lot about reconciliation and the importance of doing a recon every day for that day. And keep that thought, because it stuck with me for a long time and still sticks with me in my career. Then went back into banking and did product management. What a bank calls a product is like a credit card that you've all seen, hopefully, and EFT payments. That is the payment you do in internet banking or cross-border payment, etc., etc. So I did that, and then joined Barclays Africa, which was at that stage a subsidiary or the group company for Absa. Traveled a lot, had very interesting travels into Egypt, got to visit the pyramids, the famous pyramids, and ride on a camel's back. A lot of fun. And at this very juncture, I want to actually then share with you why that was for me a very, very interesting point in my career and in my life. It's because my dream has always been to live the joy of Christ wherever I go. And that sounds like an easy thing to do, right? But at the end of the day, when you are within your career or in your daily life and the pressures of life gets on top of you, sometimes you get so focused on those issues of life, you forget to be joyful. And at that point in Egypt, when I got to visit the pyramids and be on the camel's back, and I looked across that valley of, I think, 14 pyramids, if I've got it right, I just remembered the journey of my Savior. And it reminded me of how important it is to live your dream. And I made a decision there to go back to basics and just every single day be joyful for what I receive from my Creator, and live that out with the talents that He's given me. And I then set myself some goals, and a couple of goals was to be the best at what I can be in my job, be a professional in payments, and hopefully one day get to spend some time on a farm, because I always wanted to enjoy farm life. And if I then step back, I then joined Visa. After that, interesting travels into Africa, spent a bit of time in the Barclays space, and then joined Visa. And that was about 3 years ago. And since joining Visa, I've had the privilege of visiting many spaces. And I've been literally in every continent except Southern America, just to give you a quick glance. Okay, and obviously not Antarctica yet, but let's see. So what does Visa actually do then? If we then say it's such an interesting company and I get to travel the world, what does it actually do? And I thought it'd be good to explain to you a couple of things. So I showed you the credit card earlier. I've got a little handful here. So there's a TymeBank debit card. For some of you who've seen TymeBank and Pick n Pay, you get it straight off the kiosk at Pick n Pay. There's a Woolworths Visa credit card, and then just my Investec card that I get from my bank. And then there's a very interesting development of getting your card on your phone. So I don't know if you can see that, but that's my Discovery card on my Apple device. And there's all my other cards. Let me see if I can get the screen right. Oh, there it is. There's all my other cards roughly on the screen of my phone. It's not coming through as great. And why I'm showing you that is that the world is being transformed. From a payments perspective, there's a lot of interesting things happening, and the digitization of payments is a massive drive. And why that's important also from an accounting perspective is that payments is what makes your reconciliation go out or balance. It changes the levels between your assets, liabilities, and equity all the time. And at the end of the day, if you do a great job at understanding the payment space and the intricacies of that, your job just makes so much more sense. So let's quickly step into what Visa does. So Visa aims to be the trusted engine of commerce. That's our stated aim. Visa is not a bank, yet most banks in the world use Visa in the back of their technology to facilitate payment transactions. We've got over 16,000 banks that issue a Visa cards or credentials. We've got over 3.5 billion pieces of plastic out there in the world. We operate in about 208 or 210 countries, depending on how you slice some of the geographies in Africa. And we've got just over 5 to 6 million merchants where Visa cards are accepted. So quite a big network. And that network does a lot of very interesting things. And let me start with a quick, simple transaction. You all go shopping, whether you go to Woolworths or Pick n Pay or ShopRite or the corner cafe or a spa or anywhere you want to go and buy some groceries. You would, at the end of the line and at the till, get a little amount that you must pay, and you'll make a choice. You'll make a choice whether you've got cash in your wallet, whether you're going to use your card. And most of you who have a bank account would have received a card with a bank account. And that card will either have a MasterCard or a Visa logo on it in South Africa. And what that transaction then entails at that, let's call it Pick n Pay till, is you have to pay your 500 Rand. It appears on the little till or card terminal device. And in under 1.5 seconds, 14 digital hops happen. Now, let me explain that quickly to you. You would tap or dip your card with your PIN at that little terminal. It'll speak to the till will speak to the mainframe will speak to the back end. That'll speak to the bank of Pick n Pay. The bank of Pick n Pay will speak to Visa. Visa will speak to the bank where your card is. So let's say you've got an F&B card and Pick n Pay, the terminal from Pick n Pay is managed or driven by Absa Bank. Absa Bank will pass a transaction to Visa, Visa to F&B. F&B will check if you've got money and have that 7 hops back to the terminal to say approved. And that's all done in under 1.5 seconds. So it's 14 hops. And we don't think of that, it just happens. And it happens very, very quickly. Now, that's just an everyday transaction that most of us are all used to. And Visa can do that type of transaction 65,000 times a second. So let that sink in. Every breath, every moment I speak now, 65,000 transactions a second, 24/7, 365, all year round. So it's a pretty impressive network. It's the most secure network on the planet, and it's also the largest network on the planet. Processes the most transactions of any network and can do various very interesting things with that network. Now, why is that logo on that card? The logo on your bank card tells the merchant that you are paying or trying to pay that it's a legitimate card that you're presenting with your bank logo and the Visa logo on there. And the Visa network in the back end then assures that merchant that that payment will happen in that quick time frame. So if you bring a bank card, or you've got a bank card, just unlikely in South Africa, but in any other country that doesn't have a Visa or MasterCard or some other payment schemes network on it, the merchant is very likely not to be able to accept the payment and help you to conclude the payment. So that's the reason why there's a MasterCard and a Visa logo on cards in South Africa. Now, you can do a card, what we call face-to-face card transaction. You can use your phone, and Apple Pay is launched this year in South Africa. And what that essentially does is it puts your card in your phone, and it makes your phone the payment instrument, which is much, much more secure because the technology on your phone is very, very high tech. Whether you use your finger or there's a face scan or you use your own PIN, it is very, very secure and also very quick. You can also use that online. So when you go to Takealot or your favorite shoe shop online or Amazon, you can do your payment using that exact same card credential or your plastic card number, or in certain cases, you can actually just use your Apple Pay phone capability and sync the payment online. So very, very, very interesting. I think the other one I just wanted to quickly mention is that when we talk movement of money, there's a couple of very interesting scenarios to consider. So in the banking space, we talk about consumer to business payments. That is when you pay Pick n Pay, you're paying a business. Then they talk about business to consumer payments. That is mostly done when you receive your salary. A business is paying you as a consumer money for the work that you've done. Then you get person to person payments, and that is me and you paying each other. Usually that happens in cash. And there's a lot of work being done to make sure that can happen digitally as well and securely. And then the other one that's very, very prominent and growing at massive pace is business to business payments. Now, again, as CAs and accountants, business to business payments is extremely important to understand and extremely important to make efficient. And that's exactly where Visa and these card schemes come in. And that's to help integrate a lot of these payment capabilities and make it simple for a business to do payments. I'll give you a quick example. If you're a small business, you're very, very likely to have your own personal account. You have a little business account, and then you'll have your internet banking or mobile banking from your bank. And if you want to pay someone, you've got to make a choice between using your own card, cash, your business card, or online banking. It's already 4 choices. Depending on that choice you make, you'll have to do some administration in the background to match that invoice to that payment that you've just done. If it's digital and it's in your bank and it's on your bank statement and you can download it, so much easier to reconcile. And that's the beauty of card payment as well. At Visa, we've got many services that help small businesses integrate their payments. We've got the capability to match payments so that when you do your reconciliation and your accounting system, you literally pull in the Visa file capability. And in most cases, 99% or 99.1% of transactions are already matched, which makes your cash book and other reconciliation elements and updates much, much easier. Now, that's all good and well. What does that do for a business when you travel? So let's say I want to go to China, I want to buy some components for a very funky new piece of technology that I'm going to build in a little factory in South Africa, and I've got to sell it. I've got a lot of things to consider. A couple of them would be to say, how would I pay? But how would I order? How would I confirm payment? And how do I get the goods here? And all those aspects today is much more digital than it was 10 or 20 years ago. And what we found during the pandemic and COVID, as many of you mentioned, and this was also mentioned at the start of the call, has had a massive impact on how people transact. I'll give you a couple of stats. 51% of people over 50 in South Africa that today does e-commerce transactions, buy online with Willies or Takealot, whoever, that their first online transaction, e-commerce transaction, in that first quarter of first 3 months of the first wave of COVID. And they continued. And the reason they did is, firstly, there was a trust thing. Did they trust e-commerce before? No, and it wasn't really necessary to use it because I could just go to the shops and it was convenient. It was what I was very used to doing. But the moment they didn't have a choice, they tried it. There was already a lot of people in South Africa, especially the younger generation, that used it quite often. And our technology landscape and connectivity landscape in South Africa is pretty good. So they could get the first transaction done, test it, and the goods got delivered. It was a fairly easy experience. Nobody stole their money, and they started trusting it. And what we're seeing is that many of these large shopping retailers like Pick n Pay, ShopRite, Game, Macro, etc., had hundreds of % growth on their e-commerce platforms because it became very convenient, well trusted, and easy to pay through those services. Now, Visa sees a lot of that traffic, and we track it regularly, and that's why we have these interesting stats to prove that the digital payment space is really growing and making it easier for people to transact, even under very difficult circumstances like we experienced in lockdown. The second very interesting stat is that you would have noticed that you've got this little tap and pay or tap and go logo on your card. I'll just position this one. You'll see there it is on top, that little Wi-Fi logo there. And most cards in South Africa have that logo on the front of the card, which means that card can be tapped at a card terminal for payment. Most banks in South Africa made the choice to do it tap and you enter your PIN for additional security. But if you look at countries like the UK, in Dubai, in Singapore, in Australia, New Zealand, and Malaysia, most of those countries have actually set a limit, and you can tap under that limit, no questions asked. It's as good as cash. Now, there are banks in South Africa that made exactly that same choice, up to a limit of 200 Rand, and I think 1 or 2 banks up to a limit of 500 Rand. And that means that if your card gets lost, yes, that 500 to 200 Rand is as good on your card as cash, which means it can be tapped and the money can be used by the wrongdoer. The good news, though, is your bank will know exactly where it was used and which merchant has the money. The second piece is the moment you report it to your bank, they can put a stop in place, which means that your cash cannot disappear. And if it then disappears still after you've reported it, the bank will pay your money back. Now, that is much better than cash, because with cash in your wallet, if it's stolen, it's gone. But it doesn't mean cash is totally inconvenient. It is just an alternative. Let's say you can put Visa and cash next to each other, and both will do the job. Now, if we then step back and say, so what does that mean for South Africa? During this whole pandemic, what was very interesting, as people got through the first wave, they felt more comfortable tapping their cards with a PIN or just tapping than giving their card to the teller or handling cash. And we saw a significant adoption update of contactless transactions or tap and go transactions, where before the pandemic, it was around 18-20% of all card transactions, debit or credit card transactions, was tap and go. Today we sit at nearly 50%, and that is in less than 2 years. And it was launched 10 years ago. So it just shows you how digital payments in a specific scenario like COVID has helped people to choose an alternative way of paying that made it more comfortable for them. I think the other one I wanted to highlight is just the convenience that I've seen in certain of my travels on payments. I will not forget the time I traveled to San Francisco, and I've had the opportunity to travel a couple of times with Visa. and I went to the Amazon Go store in San Francisco. And I had the experience of buying a coffee cup or mug for myself and my wife. And I picked it and I held it up in the store, and I wanted to check, now, how does this work? Because they told me you go into the store, you pick what you want, and you walk out. Payment just happens. And I wanted to really test this. And I took 2 mugs, I took a sandwich, I took a cold drink, I put the sandwich and the cold drink back, and I walked out to check if it will actually bill me for the sandwich and the cold drink. And it wasn't even 10 seconds as I was starting to walk down the street, and I got this SMS to my phone, South African phone, on roaming, with my South African card, and the payment happened as I went through the doors of that store. So that for me was a very interesting experience. And now understanding the technology and what it takes behind the scenes to get that transaction done, it was exactly what I told you earlier, the experience of Pick and Pay. The difference was that there were signals in the store, or let's call it Bluetooth, Wi-Fi type of connectivity devices in the store, RFID IDs in the packaging, so they could pick up exactly what type of item I took, what its barcode was, and they could track that RFID with my phone as I was walking out the store. And as I walked through the turnstiles, it picked up that I left, and it billed my account. So very, very interesting. And that was about 2-3 years ago in San Francisco that I had that experience. And I think that is an interesting indication of where the world of payments will go eventually. Second one that was very interesting for me was when I visited the Innovation Center from Visa in not San Francisco, Dubai, sorry. And there was this experience that they created, which is like a demo of how one of the banks and a large retailer there wanted to make it simple for people to buy and order food or pre-order food. And the example and the demo they did was the person would buy a Samsung fridge that had a camera inside. They would link the Samsung fridge to their iPhone home accessory list. They would also link their car to the iPhone home accessory list. And they would set up those two, let's call it devices, because the car became a device. They would set it up as 2 stock-taking devices. And what happened is the person would, in the demo, be at the office, get an SMS. The SMS would say, listen, your milk in your fridge is low. Do you want to replace your milk? They would reply on the phone, yes. The system in the background would say, okay, let's do a quick price check. Today, for instance, Woolies or Pick and Pay or Spar or USave has got a special on milk. And you need to pick if you want to make use of the special. You say yes. It will then check your car and say your car's fuel tank is half. Do you want to top it up? You say yes. And you say, listen, my favorite refueling station is Sasol. And the system will then calculate the best route, taking account of traffic, for you to go and fill your vehicle up closest to a USave at a Sasol on your way home. And it will actually, when you get into your car, take you straight to Google Maps and take you en route. And as you arrive at the Sasol, the fuel pump would be paid, USave would be paid, and you get your package of milk. So that was also an extremely, extremely interesting demo that I saw and that I experienced. And it just made me understand and realize that the world of payments and the world of business is becoming one thing. A business cannot operate without being able to pay. And in this new post-COVID world, if your payments doesn't have a capability of digitization in it, it's not impossible to have a business. It's just going to be very difficult. And as accountants and CAs, the difference between what type of model your business chooses is going to make your life easier or more difficult to report, do monthly reports, daily accounts, and balance the books at the appropriate times. So that for me was very, very interesting. Now, I just want to quickly also give you some insights into what's happening in South Africa from a payments perspective that you might find interesting. South Africa has got a very, very evolved payment system. It's renowned in the world as a first world payment system. It's been at the top of the league, probably top 25 payment industry in the world for many years. And South Africa's got a very strong banking system. It's also got very good forward thinking. And at this moment, the South African Central Bank, the Reserve Bank, has got many different, let's call it modernization and futuristic elements that they are busy working on. And one of them is cryptocurrency. So from a crypto perspective, and circling back to Visa, we did a first cryptocurrency enablement at the beginning of this year with what is deemed stablecoin. Now, let me give you the three categories. At crypto, roughly, you get Bitcoin and Ethereum coins and those type of coins, which are asset coins. So you buy into an asset, and it either grows or declines, like any other asset does. And then you get a stable coin, which is linked to a currency of a country. Now, this enablement we did at the beginning of the year, we did a US stable coin enablement, which means that digital coin or that crypto coin was marked one-on-one with the US dollar. So you would know that if you pay with, you had to pay $2 to someone, you could use 2 US DC or US digital currency. Now enable that on a Visa card, and also enabled that into the internet or the e-commerce space, so that people could translate in the morning their crypto asset into a stable coin currency and then move from there. So that was very interesting. The third one is central banks are also moving into this space, which they call CBDC or central bank digital currencies. And that is also something that will probably in the near future become visible in South Africa. We don't have any timelines at this stage, unfortunately, but there is work on the go. And what that will do in the future is it will allow people who have cryptocurrencies as assets to start using or translating that into stable currency and being able to transact with it as you would transact with your physical cash or your electronic cash in your bank account. Now, I'm going to pause there and just check if there's any questions, and then I want to jump into a quick quiz, if I may. So, Jessica, you need to guide me here if you're comfortable to have some shout outs or any top of mind questions.
Apilele, you can handle it. Shout out or in the chat box, whatever.
And if there's no questions, I'm going to go into a quick quiz. Got Claudia asking a question.
Hi, I was wondering, we hear a lot about things like PayPal and Cash App in the US, and that doesn't really have seemed to kind of migrated over to South Africa. Could you see things like that becoming like more accessible to people like us anytime soon?
Yeah, PayPal is actually available in South Africa. You can use it on many websites. The trick is you've got to top it up into what we call the PayPal wallet, either using your card or using your bank's EFT, which makes it 2 hops to get value into your PayPal wallet. So it's not as convenient maybe as the US. But PayPal is doing quite well. And then you've got what we call local wallets. And I'll give you a quick example. So you could top up your let's call it Vodacom wallet account, and you can then use that to buy either airtime, or you can use it to purchase some e-commerce goods, and that's at its starting phase. So Claudia, my view is that those things will all come to South Africa's shores probably in the next within 18 to 24 months, and it will become available to use. I think the trick we have in South Africa, we've got so much choice that for those let's call it payment instruments to scale and reach profitability, they're up against a lot of competition in South Africa. But I think they're going to definitely make a dent. We'll see. I see there's a question from Johan. in the chat. Apelele, shall I go for it?
Yes, please. Would you
Great.
be able to mine this
Yes.
new type of coin? That's the question.
Okay, so a US stable coin or central bank stable coin at this stage would be a translation coin, if I can put it that way. So you wouldn't mine that coin. That coin would be issued by the central bank, not like they issue a physical coin or a physical note. They will have a control register where they issue stable coins against, but you can sell your mined coins through an exchange to get value into stablecoin, if that makes sense. So you can translate through an exchange, get USD or get South African Rand, and translate that to a stable coin, stable crypto coin, or a central bank crypto coin instead of rands in your bank. So that's roughly how it will work. Johan, does that help? Great stuff. Happy it makes sense. Vilele, any other questions?
No, at this point, no question.
yet.
We're looking forward to the quiz.
Okay, I'm going to do a quiz, and how it's going to work is I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to ask 3 questions, and then I'm going to do a countdown. So it's not very professional, so you'll have to excuse me for it. I'm going to just do the 10, 9, 8 up to 1. And then what I'm going to ask is if you can pop the questions into the chat, or the answers into the chat. And as we go to 1, I'm going to stop it and then answer stop, and we'll see who's got it right. And then I'm going to ask you and Jessica maybe just to make a note of who all got it right, so we can get to a scenario of the group that we're going to get some interesting prizes from. Okay, before I do that, I see there's a question from Lilwe. Would these translation coins not defeat the purpose of digital coins, which is decentralized? So this is the interesting thing. So the decentralized digital coin component of this will depend on how the actual owner of that stable coin wants to manage it. Now let me explain that. So if you've got the South African Central Bank managing a central bank digital coin, it will be decentralized in a private network potentially, or in an open network. So depending on how they set that up, you will then be able to access and view the coin. Whether it's going to defeat the purpose, we'll have to wait and see, because sometimes if there's not a problem to solve, then it doesn't help you making a plan, right? You've got to know and understand exactly what you're solving for before you issue such a product or such a coin. And I think that's the challenge that the central bank, the banks, etc., will work through. Hope that answers it for you. Does these coins mean it's possible for everyday person to hedge currency, or am I misunderstanding the purpose? So from a currency perspective, there's 2 elements. I think firstly, you have the volatility in the asset-based side of the coin. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc., it's got all its volatility, and then you're gonna translate that into a currency, matched stable coin, which means that if it's ZAR matched stable coin and the ZAR's got fluctuation, you will still have currency fluctuation. And then the hedging is based on your hedging strategy, whether you've got a hedging strategy against a currency like the USD or pound or euro, and then you can decide whether you want to match it to a coin in that space. It makes it quite tricky and quite interesting on how it's going to work in the future, and we've got to wait for regulation also in terms of what's going to be allowed. I also think the Central Bank of South Africa will, through the exchange control policy, be pretty tight on what you can and cannot do, and that your annual allowance of how much money you can take offshore or translate into any of these currencies, that comes into play. Hope that helps, Morgan. Was it Sarah? Sarah.